Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Brennan, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday World Meditation. This is being broadcasted from my home in upstate New York, and I'm honored to be here. This sacred time and space is devoted to our shared practice of entering stillness together, of giving together, and of being together. Let us now surround and protect ourselves with the love and the grace of God. Before we begin the meditation, I'd like to share a passage from the New Message About Practice. Before I do that, I'd like to read a little something based on what I'm going to read from the Allies Briefing 4, Chapter Higher Powers, which means quite a bit to me. And I'd just like to bring in some of my own little experiences of it before I read it to you. I've been thinking about the Allies quite a bit lately and the meaning of their presence to us in the world and the wisdom they have given our world. I've tried to visualize the sacrifice each member has made and the suffering that sacrifice has created in their own lives. The sacrifice and suffering they have endured has endeared to us, through their experiences, great wisdom. And I feel this wisdom that we've gained from them is connected to the messenger and his sacrifice, his suffering and burden. He has endured to bring a new message of God into the world. A world full of ignorance and arrogance, but a world like many others, full of intelligent life, living in separation. A world, though, here, where knowledge has been kept alive. Through my practice, I can see now how this is connected to our own freedom as individuals and as a world, and our ability to forgive ourselves and one another. For I feel freedom truly cannot be attained if one cannot forgive. And one cannot forgive if he or she does not have the freedom to do so. Both freedom and forgiveness are born of knowledge. How we view one another, how we forgive one another through compassion without judgment and condemnation, will determine our destiny in the future. For what we do as an individual now into the future is part of our own evolution as a whole. This evolution we are experiencing and moving through is connected to the evolution of all races in the universe, and is part of a return to our true selves, a return to our spiritual families, and a return to our source. These things are all a part of a greater coordination, which is a miracle to me. And the freedom to move where one must, and to cultivate the ability to forgive so that we may learn about ourselves and each other. This is just some of the wisdom I have gained from the allies of humanity. So again, I'm going to read the whole chapter, which is a short one, but it contains so much wisdom. It's every time I read it, it's a miracle to me. It gets deeper and deeper, as the whole of the new message does. This is entitled Higher Powers, from the fourth briefing of the Allies of Humanity. There are two realities in the universe. One overlaps the other. The first and most primary in our experience is the reality of separation, evolutionary change. Planetary change from primitive life, primitive social organizations, early nations, larger nations, world nations, and finally emergence into a greater community of larger nations. Overlapping this is the work of the divine throughout the universe, carried out by the higher powers. an angelic force that oversees all races, even in the unfree nations looking for opportunities to cultivate knowledge in individuals who are free enough and able enough to respond. This creates a great network of the wise, which then can support the emergence of free nations who still have the potential for this great accomplishment. In the physical universe, there are only the forces that were set in motion at the beginning of time. There is no divine plan organizing everything, controlling everything, for the physical universe is largely chaotic and governed by celestial forces, geologic forces, and within worlds where life has been able to take hold, biological forces. That was all set in motion at the beginning of time by the divine, and it is running itself now. The divine intervention is through the higher powers, through the networks of the wise, and through nations that have been able to keep individual awareness and knowledge alive, despite all the hazards and conflict that usually exist in the world's evolution and social development. As we have said, there are no enlightened races in the universe that we are aware of, but there are free races. And within free races, the wise may guide their nations. They would be more plentiful than they would ever be in nations that are not free. The divine has outposts in many, many places, and there are groups of the wise working in many, many places, even in the great secrecy. Free nations allow these groups to resurface and become effective in society. But the truly wise are individuals networked in small groups, networked within their own nation, or networked between nations, connected through the higher powers. So do not think that there is an enlightened race who is going to come and enlighten humanity, or that humanity itself is going to become an enlightened race. That is far beyond its capabilities. But to be a free race where knowledge can be fostered and supported openly, that is the great achievement. That is the great challenge and requirement placed before you now. There are two kinds of freedom. There is practical freedom to live your life without overdue restraint or domination, practical freedom to live with stability and security without the constant threat of war or overbearing corruption. This is the foundational freedom, and it is so very important. It is the first thing that must be established. Then there is the greater spiritual freedom of the individual to begin the return to the divine and to gain access to the deeper knowledge that God has created in all individuals, in all races in the universe, who are living in separation in physical reality. This greater freedom is the calling of individuals, and it is limited by the fundamental freedoms that may have in their respective worlds and cultures. But the greater freedom is the ultimate freedom because the power of heaven can move through these individuals in service to others and through the great networks of the wise. Foster freedom and knowledge in the entire greater community. You must understand that the work of the divine in your world is connected to the work of the divine in all worlds. There is no special plan for your world, which is but a tiny place in a greater universe. God's plan is unified and well established, and knowledge lives within you as an individual, which is how you connect with the divine presence and power, and how you begin to gain your inner freedom, even beyond the restraints of your outer environment. Wherever the fundamental freedom can be built and established and maintained over time represents a greater possibility for the higher freedom to be fostered and supported, and the greater freedom that it will have in its expression in the world, in that nation, in that culture. For freedom in the universe is not the freedom to further your separation. It is the freedom to return to your source and to be of service in this physical reality. As you can see here, even your most fundamental notions of peace, freedom, and responsibility must now be redefined within the larger context. Or you will continue to think that your peace and your freedom and your responsibility are for yourself alone, or for your family alone. This is not what these things mean in the greater community. And these will not be effective or even meaningful in the world you are now beginning to enter, where environmental degradation, the loss of food production, and the changing climate of your world will make life much more difficult, requiring greater participation and cooperation if you are to succeed. Even those things that threaten you from the outside, or they can undermine you here in this world, can foster greater freedom in the truest sense if this opportunity is recognized and claimed by enough people. The greater the challenge, the greater the opportunity. For right now, as humanity is far too weak, far too divided, far too disorganized to ever be able to sustain itself as a free and sovereign race in the universe. What will build this strength, this cooperation, this freedom, and this responsibility are the great challenges that are facing you now. The challenge of degradation and collapse from within, and the challenge of intervention and subjugation from without. Only these great and overbearing challenges will generate the requirement for freedom, strength, responsibility that we speak of here. Not everyone will be able to respond to this challenge. But even if a small minority of people in your world can do this, it can lead to a greater outcome. The world is governed by small numbers of people, for better or for worse. In this case, a small number of people could save the entire race from collapse and disintegration. Yes, it is a tremendous challenge. Yes, it seems to be unfair to your understanding. It even seems to be cruel to your understanding. But this is what it means to grow up in the universe, to become a mature race and not an adolescent race that fights and struggles amongst itself for privilege and wealth and opportunity. We have had to grow up under the pain and challenge of intervention and the degradation of our own worlds. It is part of life, becoming an adult, becoming responsible, not only for oneself, but for the well-being of one's world. Driven now by necessity, driven now by challenge, driven now by great threat. All these things are the foundation for the strength, the wisdom, the cooperation that you will need for the great change that is coming for the world. We therefore do not bring you peace as you think of it. We bring challenge. We bring responsibility. We bring clarity. We bring wisdom. We bring strength. We bring the calling for all these things. If you could but see or have a sense for where your life is heading and the degree of intervention in your world today, it will either defeat you or you will rise to meet it. Such is the unseen opportunity here. God knows this is the greatest threshold for the human family, the greatest threshold you have ever faced and may ever face. A declining world and emergence into the greater community, which usually accompany each other. God has sent a new message into the world. We know of this. That is part of what has called us here to encourage the human family. We will speak of this next, for it is fundamental to your success and to your freedom. Now this one, I'm sorry, but I didn't mention this, but the last paragraph I'd like to read is going into the greater coordination, which is the fifth briefing. We are aware that a great revelation is being sent to the world. Though we have not been given this revelation ourselves, we are connected to it. It is because God has asked us to do this through the networks of the wise, to take this promising world of yours and give it wisdom, encouragement, strength, and purpose that it must have now to overcome its tendencies and to prepare for its challenging future. Now, please join me in a 30-minute stillness practice. Take whatever time you need to read your own step. and then enter stillness when you're ready. Nase Navari Karam. While we're in this place of stillness, I'd like to share a passage from the New Message speaking about the messenger. This is from the Worldwide Community of the New Message, the chapter, How to Regard the Messenger. Humanity is facing the greatest change it has ever faced as a world, as a whole. A new world reality of environmental destruction and political and economic upheaval. You know not what is coming over the horizon and what you face. Though you may feel anxious about the future and uncertain, what is coming is greater, likely than your estimation. The need for revelation is responding to the reality of your present and future life, of which you know little at all. What the messenger teaches and what he says are second only to the revelation itself. And because he is recording it, and those close to him are recording this, its authenticity is more likely to be assured. Part of the message is within him. It is part of his role now to clarify the revelation, to dispel those myths and misconceptions that would prevent people from having a clear and direct understanding, to bring the revelation together, to organize it so it can be presented clearly with the greatest possibility of being recognized and accepted in a world of ever greater dissonance and discord and anxiety. He is coming a time before the great waves of change will strike the world profoundly, giving people time to understand what is coming and to prepare wisely and constructively, not only to serve themselves, but to serve others. For that is why they have come. That is why you have come, not to enrich yourself or provide a comfort zone around yourself, but to play a small but necessary part in preparing for the great change that is coming, and to preserve what is greatest and most powerful and beneficial within the human family. God's new revelation clarifies what this is, what it means, and how it can be preserved and made real and efficacious in a world that is so slowly breaking down. In this, you must honor the messenger, for no one else can receive this. He was the chosen one. He is not merely a man who was one day given a great message. He was prepared before he even came into the world. But he had to undergo the long process of becoming a functional and competent human being, a human being capable of gaining a greater wisdom, a compassionate individual, an individual without ambition, without hatred, without seeking revenge against others. This required a long preparation before he even had a clue of what he would be required to do, to see, and to know. The revelation is far more important. It cannot be given to someone who does not have this reliability or this predestination. People will proclaim they are bringing new messages from God, but it really is old information that is simply being recycled through once again, with great fanfare perhaps, but it does not do what the real revelation can do. It does not change the reality of humanity. It does not initiate people into a greater service and a greater relationship with the divine, for it has not the power of heaven within it, unless it is the true revelation. You will have to deal with this fact that the messenger is in your midst. And when he is gone, you'll have to deal with the fact that he is gone, and that his great gift must be preserved and protected without alloying it with other things, without adding or subtracting from it the parts that you like or dislike. You must have it all for it to be powerful and real. The messenger is an older man now, In his remaining years, there is much that he must do to bring the revelation together, to add to it, to proclaim it, and to provide teachings to clarify many of its major and minor teachings, all of which are very, very important for people to receive over time. Do not think you can understand something of this magnitude at one moment, at one time. It is a teaching of 1,000 teachings, given now to a literate world, a world of global communication, global commerce, and growing global awareness. Given now not in pastoral terms or anecdotal terms or with great symbolism, but in the clearest possible language so that it may be translated easily, so that its great depth can become accessible to people of all nations and languages. Let us spend a few moments together with being with Marshall and send him our love and strength and our deep gratitude. Now see if there are others in the world or in your life who need to receive this strength as well. If so, spend a moment sending them the strength or another quality to these individuals. Nase Navari Karam. It's been an honor each time I do this to be with you all, with the messenger and his family. May you all be a beacon of light in the world for others. May your strength be their strength. Thank you for coming. Take care.